My name is Claire Donovan, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in a retired general's dining hall, being dismissed as nothing more than dead weight in uniform. As my boyfriend Daniel Carter squeezed my hand beneath the table, his grandfather, General Richard Carter, locked me in a cold, piercing stare. 20 distinguished guests, all tied to wealth and military influence, froze in silence as the words dead weight cut through the air, his gravelly voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. My chest tightened, but instead of breaking, something within me, something I carried from years in service, rose to the surface. Before I tell you how I responded, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part of the story about how I defended my dignity. I met Daniel 7 months before that night. At the time, I was stationed stateside after multiple deployments, picking up part-time work at Ironwood Gym, a veteran-owned training facility near the harbor in Boston. The pay wasn't much, but it kept me grounded while I transitioned out of active duty and attended evening classes for a degree in strategic communications. Every morning at exactly 0600, Daniel would come in for a workout before heading to his office. Unlike the other executives in sharp suits who treated the staff like background noise, Daniel always acknowledged me, looked me in the eye, said thank you, and struck up small conversations. He had steady blue eyes, the kind that didn't dart around a room, and a calm way of carrying himself that set him apart. "You've got good discipline showing up every single day at this hour," I teased one morning after he'd been coming for weeks. He chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I like the workouts, sure. But I also like the company." The way he said it, lingering on the words, made my pulse quicken in a way combat never had. That day I learned his full name, Daniel Carter, when he filled out a registration form. He started hanging around longer, asking about my time in the Marines where I had served, what I planned to do after. I told him I grew up in a small military town in North Carolina, raised by a father who worked construction and a mother who balanced everything else. I enlisted at 18, served multiple tours overseas, and was now grinding through night classes to prepare for civilian life. What I didn't say was how often I'd skipped meals just to stretch my GI Bill, or how hard it was to sleep without the sound of helicopters overhead. "That takes grit," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "Most people I know have never had to fight for anything." That was the first hint Daniel came from privilege, though he never flaunted it. He dressed clean but understated, wore a watch that was expensive yet subtle, and drove a car that didn't scream new money. A month into our conversations, he finally asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a small Italian spot, simple but far nicer than anything I'd splurge on for myself. The conversation flowed easily. He wasn't arrogant, wasn't trying to impress me with titles or wealth. Instead, he asked about leadership, camaraderie, the things I missed from the Corps. "My family has ties to defense contracts," he admitted eventually, "but honestly, I'd rather build something of my own, something that matters." That night, after he dropped me off, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up his family name. My stomach dropped when I realized Daniel was the grandson of General Richard Carter, a decorated war hero turned defense magnate who had his hands in everything from private security firms to weapons manufacturing. For a moment I thought about cutting things off, convinced our worlds were too far apart. But Daniel called the next day, his voice warm, no pretense, no arrogance, just him. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see him again. Over the next 6 months we built something real. He never made me feel like I was less because of where I came from. He'd grab burgers at my favorite hole-in-the-wall diner just as easily as he'd take me somewhere refined. He even encouraged me to push my communications degree further, telling me, "You've got leadership most people only read about in textbooks, Claire. Any team would be lucky to have you." When he finally said he loved me, it wasn't some dramatic display. We were walking along the Charles River at dusk, no crowd, no champagne, just the two of us and his quiet confession. I realized in that moment that I loved him too, not for his family's reputation or resources, but for his integrity, his patience, and the way he saw me for who I truly was. Yes, there were reminders of our different upbringings. He'd casually mention family trips skiing in the Alps while I was more excited about stretching a $100 grocery budget. But Daniel always listened. He never mocked, never dismissed. For 6 months it felt like we were in a world of our own. I truly thought maybe, just maybe, our backgrounds wouldn't matter. I had no idea how wrong I was. The invitation came one rainy Tuesday in April. Daniel and I were curled up on my worn-out couch, sharing takeout and watching an old war film when he paused the screen. My grandparents are celebrating their 60th anniversary next month, he said, tracing circles absent-mindedly on my arm. There's going to be a formal dinner at the estate. I want you to come with me. My fork froze midair. The estate? As in, meet your entire family? Daniel nodded, his expression somewhere between hopeful and anxious. I know it's a big deal, but we've been together for half a year. You're important to me. I want them to meet you. How many people are we talking about? I asked, my stomach already twisting. About 30. Mostly family, a few of my grandfather's closest military friends, some business partners. But don't worry. They'll like you, Claire. I promise. His confidence was sweet, but it didn't calm my nerves. For the next 3 weeks, I obsessed over one question. How do you walk into a general's world without losing yourself? How should I act? What if I said the wrong thing or made some mistake in front of people who'd been raised on silver spoons and strict etiquette? My best friend, Maya, listened to my spiraling worries over coffee that Sunday morning. You need a dress that makes you feel unshakable, she declared. Something that reminds you who you are the second you put it on. We spent the afternoon scouring stores, but everything remotely suitable cost more than half a month's rent. Just as my frustration peaked, Maya offered a lifeline. I still have that midnight blue gown from my cousin's military ball last year. With a couple alterations, it'll fit you like it was made for you. I can't take your dress, I protested, though the relief was already washing over me. Of course you can. And take my pearl studs too. You'll look powerful, not just pretty. The week before the dinner I practiced, walking in those heels around my cramped apartment like it was a drill. I watched videos on dining etiquette, memorized which fork went with which course, and even researched the Carter family's long history of military service so I wouldn't be caught off guard in conversation. The night before the event, my older sister Rachel called me. She'd practically raised me when our father passed, and she'd always been the one to snap me back into reality. Remember, Claire, she said firmly, her voice steady as ever. You've led soldiers into combat. You've held yourself together under fire. You are disciplined, capable, and worthy of respect, regardless of how much brass or money sits at that table. Don't let anyone shrink you. Her words stayed with me the next evening as I dressed. The borrowed gown flowed elegantly to the floor, the pearl studs catching the light. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, but I also saw the marine beneath the silk. When Daniel arrived, his expression told me everything. You look incredible, he whispered, kissing me lightly. His usual modest sedan had been swapped for a sleek black car, chauffeured to the Carter estate. As we slid into the leather seats, he noticed my nerves. They're just people, Claire, he said, squeezing my hand. Yes, they're wealthy, yes, they've worn stars on their shoulders, but they're still human. Just be you. The drive wound us through neighborhoods that grew grander by the mile until finally, we turned onto a private road lined with towering oaks. The Carter estate loomed ahead. Less a house, more a fortress dressed as a mansion. The manicured gardens, the imposing circular drive, the uniformed staff waiting outside. It all screamed legacy and power. You grew up here? I whispered. Daniel gave a sheepish smile. Yeah. Home sweet home. Ready. I drew in a deep breath, Rachel's words ringing in my ears. I belong here. I am worthy of respect. But as the double doors opened to reveal a grand hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping straight into enemy territory. The foyer was stunning. A chandelier larger than my entire apartment, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and a sweeping staircase that looked straight out of a military academy's great hall. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and cut roses. Staff moved with mechanical precision, collecting coats and offering glasses of champagne. I accepted one just to steady my hand. Daniel. A tall, elegant woman in her 50s glided toward us, her posture perfect, her hair swept into an immaculate bun. She kissed his cheeks before turning to me, her cool eyes measuring me in a single glance. And you must be Claire, she said. Mother, Daniel began gently, placing his hand at the small of my back. This is Claire Donovan. Claire, my mother, Margaret Carter. I extended my hand, keeping my grip firm. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Carter. Thank you for welcoming me. Her handshake was brief, her smile practiced. Of course, Daniel has spoken of you. The slight emphasis on spoken told me I hadn't been the subject of glowing conversations. Her gaze flicked to my gown. That's a bold color choice for spring. Before the tension could settle, another voice broke in. Finally, a younger woman rushed over, throwing her arms around me before I even knew what was happening. I've been dying to meet the woman who convinced my brother to stop bringing those insufferable debutantes around. I blinked, surprised, but laughed at her warmth. I'm Lena, the better Carter sibling, she said, shooting Daniel a teasing grin. He chuckled. Subtlety has never been her strength. Come on, Lena said, linking her arm with mine. I'll introduce you to the few people here who actually remember how to smile. As she led me through the crowd, I felt the weight of glances, quick appraisals, whispers just soft enough to sting. Introductions came one after another. Cousins, decorated officers, old family friends. Some were polite, a few even kind, but most looked at me like they were solving a puzzle they didn't quite approve of. So what do you do, Miss Donovan? Asked an older woman draped in diamonds. I served 12 years in the Marines, I replied evenly. Now I'm studying strategic communications. How quaint, she murmured, smile tight. And how exactly did you and Daniel meet? Each time I explained, I watched the same subtle expressions. Raised brows, hidden smirks, the faintest nods as if confirming some unspoken suspicion. Oh, I do adore those from the ranks to riches stories. One woman gushed as though I were a fictional heroine rather than a living, breathing woman in front of her. Daniel always did have a charitable streak, another muttered, not quietly enough. Lena squeezed my arm. Ignore them. They're just bitter that you've got backbone and don't bleed old money. Eventually we made our way to the guests of honor, Daniel's grandparents. I braced myself, expecting the same cool dismissal. But to my surprise, General Richard Carter's wife, Eleanor, greeted me warmly, her eyes kind. So you're the woman who puts a real smile on our grandson's face, she said, clasping both my hands. Richard himself gave a curt nod, but his grip was strong, testing. Daniel tells me you've served. Yes, sir, I replied, meeting his eyes without wavering. A flicker of respect crossed his features before he stepped back. Eleanor leaned in. I'd love to hear more about your service sometime, my dear. Their kindness was a brief reprieve, but as Lena led me away she whispered, Grandma and Grandpa are the only ones here who actually earned what they have. The rest? Born into the uniform and the money. The night went on with polite conversations and not-so-subtle interrogations. My accent, my education, my family, every detail examined like an after-action report. Daniel stayed close, stepping in when remarks turned sharp. But I knew the moment I'd been dreading was coming. There, he whispered, nodding toward the far side of the room. Standing at the center of a group, commanding the attention of half the guests, was General Richard Carter himself. His posture was still rigid despite his age, his medals gleaming faintly under the chandelier, his steel-gray eyes a colder reflection of Daniel's. Should we? I began. Daniel hesitated. He can be harsh. Don't take it personally. We walked over as the general finished discussing defense budgets. His gaze flicked over me in a quick, cutting assessment before settling back on Daniel. General Carter, Daniel said, his voice steady but his hand tightening around mine. I'd like you to meet Claire Donovan. I extended my hand, posture firm and confident the way the Corps had drilled into me. It's an honor to meet you, sir. His handshake was brief, his grip uncomfortably crushing, meant to test rather than greet. Indeed, was all he said, flat, dismissive and cold. No pleasantries, no welcome. Just one word that carried a lifetime of judgment. A steward announced dinner, breaking the suffocating silence. As Daniel guided me toward the dining room, I caught the general's eyes on me again, calculating, unyielding. That went better than I feared, Daniel whispered, though his voice carried tension. My gut told me he didn't believe his own words. The dining hall was a monument to tradition. A long oak table stretching beneath a massive chandelier, silver polished to a mirror shine, crystal glasses catching the light like ice. Staff directed us to our assigned seats. My heart sank as I realized I was placed directly across from the general, Daniel to my right. Down the table, Lena caught my eye and gave me a secret thumbs up. Quite the production, isn't it? Daniel murmured, pulling out my chair. Don't worry, there are only 20 courses and 16 forks. My eyes widened, but his grin reassured me he was teasing. Kidding. Just dinner, though with wine that costs more than my car. As the first course arrived, a delicate soup, I watched others carefully, mimicking their movements to avoid mistakes. Conversation around me was thick with talk of military contracts, private academies and European estates, designed, it seemed, to remind me I was an outsider. Daniel tried including me, asking for my thoughts, but each attempt only seemed to spotlight my difference. Then the general's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "So, Miss Donovan," he said, his steel-gray eyes drilling into me. "Daniel tells me you're working at some gym in Boston?" The room quieted, all eyes shifting to me. I set down my spoon with deliberate calm. "Sir, I'm with Jim. It helps cover my expenses while I finish my degree." "And what degree would that be?" His tone made clear he expected little of my answer. "Strategic communications. I'll graduate next spring." His brow lifted, unimpressed. "Communications. So, talking and presentations." "Actually, General," Daniel interjected quickly, "Claire has a talent for leadership strategy and outreach. It's not just talk, it's structure and planning." The general ignored him. "And where are you from, Miss Donovan?" "A small military town in North Carolina," I answered evenly. "Never heard of it." He sipped his wine. "And your father? What did he do?" A loaded question, and from his expression I knew he already sensed the answer. Daniel tensed beside me. "My father passed when I was young. My mother raised my sister and me alone." "And her line of work?" "She works retail now," I said. "Before that, whatever was needed. Cleaning houses, waitressing. She kept us afloat." Down the table, Eleanor murmured approvingly, "A strong woman." The general's lips tightened. "From service work to service work, generation to generation. Remarkable." Daniel slammed his fork down harder than necessary. "My mother-in-law made sacrifices most people wouldn't survive. She deserves admiration, not condescension." The second course arrived, cutting the tension but not relieving it. Daniel squeezed my hand beneath the table, silent support against the barrage. But the general wasn't finished. Between bites and casual remarks to others, he lobbed more barbed questions at me. "Did you jump straight into university after high school? Or did your intellectual curiosity arrive late? Interesting accent. Is that standard where you're from? Ever seen Europe? Oh, a pity. Travel educates those with limited exposure." Each word was polite enough to pass in conversation, but the message was clear. You don't belong here. By the time the main course arrived, a flawless cut of tenderloin, my nerves were frayed. I reached for my glass, but in my distraction tipped it slightly. A few drops of red wine stained the pristine tablecloth. "I'm so sorry," I muttered, mortified, as a steward rushed to blot it away. "No harm done," Daniel assured me gently. But the general chuckled, his voice booming across the table. "Careful. That glass costs more than she probably makes in a month." The silence that followed was sharp and uncomfortable. Daniel flushed red. "Grandfather, that's enough." "I'm simply stating facts," the general said calmly, swirling his own glass. Then his gaze locked back on me, this time with open disdain. "That gown," he continued, his voice carrying. "I don't recall seeing it in my wife's collection. Is it from this season's line?" Heat rushed to my cheeks, but I forced my voice steady. "It belongs to a friend. She lent it to me for tonight." "Ah, borrowed armor." His smile was cruel. "I suspected as much." Daniel started to rise. "I won't sit here while you insult her." "Sit down," the general barked, dismissing him with a flick of the hand. "If she intends to enter this world, she'd better grow thicker skin." "My skin's plenty thick, General," I replied, voice calm, steady. It had to be, growing up the way I did. Something in my tone seemed to infuriate him further. He set his glass down, leaned forward, and let his words cut the room into silence. "Let me be perfectly clear, Miss Donovan. My grandson may be entertained by you for now. But you are nothing more than dead weight in borrowed silk. You will never belong in this family, nor in this world." 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Margaret Carter stared at her plate. Lena's mouth fell open in disbelief. Daniel was halfway out of his chair, his face twisted with rage. My blood ran cold, but my training kicked in. In combat, chaos slowed down, every detail sharp, every sound amplified. This moment felt the same. I saw his eyes, savoring what he thought was my destruction. I felt the weight of every gaze waiting for me to break. But instead of shattering, something unexpected surged inside me. A lifetime of being underestimated, of standing taller in the face of fire. I rose slowly, smoothing the borrowed gown. A faint smile curved my lips. The room froze. The general leaned back, smug, convinced I'd flee in shame. Instead, I lifted my water glass, took a slow sip and set it down carefully. Dead weight, I repeated softly, my voice carrying through the silence. That's an interesting choice of words, General. My gaze swept the table, locking eyes with several guests. And actually, I owe you thanks. You've just made my decision a whole lot easier. The smugness flickered from his face. What nonsense are you spouting now? Daniel still thought I only worked mornings at the gym. That was true, partly. But for the past 2 years, I had also worked nights as a part-time investigative journalist for the Boston Sentinel. A ripple of whispers stirred the room. The general's knuckles whitened around his fork. 6 months before I even met Daniel, I continued, my voice steady, I was part of a team investigating military contract fraud. One name kept appearing in the files. I locked eyes with him. Yours, General Carter. We had uncovered records of illegal waste dumping in protected waters, carbon emissions well above reported limits, and a carefully hidden system of bribes paid to inspectors across 3 different countries. The air in the dining hall shifted from shocked to stunned. Lena's eyes darted between her grandfather and me in disbelief. Eleanor Carter pressed a hand to her chest, while General Carter's own son, Daniel's father, looked grim, his jaw clenched. When I realized who Daniel was, I continued, voice even, I faced an ethical dilemma. I told my editor immediately and removed myself from the investigation. I even begged the paper to delay publishing while we searched for more corroborating sources. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on the general's. I did that out of respect for Daniel because I fell in love with him. I didn't want your corruption to destroy what we had. But I never told him because I wouldn't put him in an impossible position. Daniel turned toward me, his face torn between shock, hurt, and something I couldn't yet name. Claire, is this true? I nodded, gently touching his hand. I'm sorry I kept it from you. I was trying to protect you, and the investigation. Turning back to the general, whose face was now flushed red with fury, I pressed on. The story wasn't held back because of weak evidence. It was ready to run months ago. I asked them to wait, to make sure every detail was airtight before I risked the reputation of Daniel's family. I straightened my shoulders. But tonight you've made something very clear to me. I let the silence hang for a moment, then continued. You see, General, I've been carrying evidence. Photographs of you meeting inspection officials on your private yacht. Signed documents authorizing false compliance reports. Audio recordings of your top aides discussing how to hide toxic dumping from regulators. A glass shattered as someone down the table dropped it. The general pushed back his chair, half standing. This is outrageous, he roared. Wild accusations without basis. I'll bury you in court for defamation. I smiled calmly. You're welcome to try. Every photo, every memo, every recording has already been vetted by our legal team. The story was ready 3 months ago. I was the only reason it didn't run. He sneered. Why would anyone listen to some washed-up soldier working at a gym? Because the key evidence, I said firmly, was gathered by me. And because Pulitzer-winning journalists have some sway in their newsrooms. That part was a stretch. I hadn't won one myself, but my mentor had, and he was the one who convinced the paper to trust my call. I lifted my chin. You're right about one thing. I came from nothing. That taught me to fight harder, to work twice as long, and to take every opportunity one could. I served 12 years in the Marines, put myself through school, and earned my place in investigative journalism the same way I earned every stripe, through grit. You think calling me dead weight would break me? It only reminded me why I stand. I pulled out my phone from the clutch resting in my lap. My thumb typed quickly as I spoke. That was a message to my editor. I'm officially lifting my objection. The article runs tonight at midnight. The dining room erupted in chaos. The general lunged forward, rage twisting his features. You little nothing. Do you know who you're dealing with? I will ruin you. Daniel shot up, stepping between us. That's enough, grandfather. You will not speak to her like that. You blind fool. the general hissed. Can't you see? She used you to get close to this family. I shook my head firmly. No, sir. I fell in love with Daniel despite his connection to you, not because of it. The moment I realized who he was, I disclosed the conflict and stepped away from the case. Finally, Margaret Carter's voice rang out, trembling but sharp. Daniel, surely you don't believe her over your own grandfather? Daniel's expression hardened. He looked at me, eyes searching, then turned to his grandfather. I've seen the reports myself. For years I've questioned the numbers and been told to stay in my lane. But I believe her. The general's face turned purple. Ungrateful boy. Everything you stand to inherit, gone because of her. And you side with this nobody. Daniel's voice was steady, steel in every word. Her name is Claire. And yes, I do. Around us, guests began making discreet exits, murmuring awkward apologies. Lena moved closer, eyes wide, a mix of shock and admiration on her face. Well, she muttered under her breath, this is definitely the most eventful anniversary dinner we've ever had. At the head of the table, Richard Carter's son finally rose, his voice dark and commanding. Father. My office. Now. The general stormed out, his wife trailing close behind, leaving silence and the faint clinking of glasses in their wake. I turned to Daniel. I should go. I'll drive you, he said instantly. I shook my head. No. You need to be here for your family. Tonight's going to be hard enough without me in the middle of it. Claire, please. We'll talk tomorrow if you still want to, I promised. As I gathered my things, Eleanor approached, taking my hands gently. My dear, while I can't say I'm thrilled about tomorrow's headline, I must admit, you showed remarkable courage tonight. No one has stood up to Richard like that in decades. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry I ruined your celebration. She gave a sad smile. 60 years of marriage has taught me one thing. Truth, however painful, is better than comfortable lies. I left with my head high, declining Daniel's offers to come with me. In the taxi, I stared out at the estate growing smaller in the distance. For all my composure at the table, my chest ached. Had I just destroyed the only real love I'd ever known? My phone buzzed. Got your text. Running the story at midnight. You okay? My editor wrote. I typed back. Yes. It was the right call. But as the cab rolled through the dark city streets, tears finally fell. Not for the humiliation, not for the general's cruelty, but for the fear that telling the truth might have cost me the man I loved. The next morning, the Boston Sentinel headline blared across newsstands. Carter Defense Empire exposed. Fraud, bribery, and environmental crimes. My byline sat beneath it. I hadn't slept a minute. I'd spent the night on calls with editors and lawyers, making sure every last detail was airtight. By morning, the story was everywhere. By noon, Carter Defense stock had plummeted 20%. By evening, the Pentagon and Department of Justice had announced investigations. My phone rang constantly. Congratulations from colleagues, offers from other outlets, my editor officially offering me a full-time role. But the one call I wanted never came. You did the right thing, Rachel told me over the phone that night. That man was a tyrant. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for everyone he trampled. Then why does it feel so awful? I asked, staring out the rain-speckled window. Because you care about Daniel, she said simply. And doing the right thing usually comes at a personal cost. 3 days later, still with no word from him, I returned to the gym. My manager looked at me with a mix of awe and concern. Are you sure you want to be here? Reporters have been sniffing around asking about you. I need normal right now, I said, tying my ponytail tight. And Marines don't quit on duty without notice. The morning passed in a blur of training sessions and furtive stares from people who recognized me from the news. Around 1,100 hours, the door opened, and in walked General Richard Carter himself. The gym went silent. He looked nothing like the commanding figure from that dinner. His face was drawn, his once immaculate suit rumpled, his shoulders heavier with disgrace. General Carter, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What can I do for you? A word, he replied gruffly. My manager stepped forward protectively. Sir, if you're here to harass. It's fine, I cut in. I'll take my break. I led him to a corner table away from the others. The tension between us was thick enough to choke. Have you come to threaten me again? I asked quietly. He studied me for a long moment. I underestimated you. Most people do, I replied evenly. That's my burden and my advantage. He exhaled almost bitterly. My lawyers tell me your reporting is factually accurate. Selective but accurate. They say a lawsuit would only backfire. Is that an admission of guilt? His jaw tightened. It's an admission of your thoroughness. The board has already placed me on leave pending the investigation. I leaned forward. Did you come here to congratulate my journalism, General? Or to bargain? His eyes narrowed. What will it take to make you stop? Money? A position? Name your price. I stared at him in disbelief. You still don't get it. This was never about money. It was about the truth. The truth. He scoffed. Do you know what this will cost? Hundreds of jobs. A company my family built. Collapsed. That's on you, I replied sharply. Not me. You chose profits over principles. You taught your people rules didn't matter if no one was watching. That's not my doing, that's yours. He studied me with a new intensity, like I was the first person in years to speak to him without fear. You really believe you're righteous, don't you? I believe in accountability. Especially for the powerful. He stood abruptly. My grandson hasn't been home in 3 days. His mother is beside herself. Whatever game you're playing with him. I love Daniel, I cut in firmly. This was never a game. And I haven't heard from him either. Something flickered in his expression. For a moment the hardened general looked almost human. He was always too idealistic for the business. Like my father. Without another word he turned and left. That evening as I stood in my kitchen staring at untouched food, a knock sounded on my door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, exhausted, unshaven but alive. Hi, he said simply. Hi, I whispered, my heart pounding. Do you want to come in? He nodded, stepping past me. We stood in silence, both of us starting to speak at once. I should have told you. I should have called. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Ladies first. I drew in a breath. I should have told you about the investigation. I convinced myself I was protecting you. Really, I was just terrified of losing you. And I should have called sooner, he admitted. I needed time to process. To look at the evidence myself. To confront him. And? I asked carefully. He nodded grimly. It's all true. And worse. I saw files even your team didn't find. He's guilty of everything you wrote and more. My whole life I thought he was harsh but honorable. Turns out I was wrong. We sat on the couch, leaving a careful gap between us. Where were you the past 3 days? I asked softly. A hotel. Meetings with lawyers. Talking with my father. Trying to think about us. His eyes met mine, sharp and searching. My chest tightened. And what conclusion did you reach? That I fell in love with a woman braver than I ever gave her credit for, he said, reaching for my hand. That I'm angry you didn't trust me with the truth. But I understand why. I'm sorry, Claire, Daniel said, his voice rough with regret. I should have stood up to him sooner. You shouldn't have had to endure his cruelty before I saw him clearly. He squeezed my hand. My family's in chaos. My mother refuses to speak to me. Lena's the only one who thinks I did the right thing by defending you. What happens to the company now? I asked. My father's stepping in temporarily as CEO. We're cooperating with investigators, preparing restitution. It'll be a long road back, if it even survives. He sighed heavily. And us? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He went quiet, his eyes searching mine. I love you, that hasn't changed. But there's pain and broken trust between us. I'm not ending things, Claire. I'm saying we rebuild slowly with complete honesty this time. He finally moved closer, clasping both my hands. If you're willing. I looked into his eyes and saw not the heir to a dynasty, but the man who'd walked with me by the river, who listened without judgment, who valued truth even when it hurt. I'm willing, I whispered. That night we talked until dawn, laying bare our fears, our wounds, our hopes. It was only the first step on a long, difficult road back to each other, but it was a step forward. 6 months blurred by. The Carter defense scandal became one of the largest military contract fraud cases in years. Our investigation triggered federal probes that led to fines exceeding $300 million. General Richard Carter was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud, and willful violations of environmental laws. Several executives faced similar charges. The fallout was devastating. Stock value collapsed nearly 40%. Entire divisions were dismantled. Hundreds of innocent employees, people who had no idea what the executives were doing, lost jobs, savings, and stability. The weight of that reality sat heavy on me. You can't carry responsibility for their crimes, my editor reminded me when I confessed my guilt. General Carter hurt those people, not you. So I couldn't let it go. So I turned guilt into fuel. 3 months later, I proposed a series focused on the human cost of corruption and how communities recover. The Sentinel gave me a team. I interviewed displaced workers who'd lost everything, scientists tracking pollution damage, and whistleblowers silenced for years. I wrote about how towns rebuild, how companies reform, how ordinary people pick up the pieces when the powerful betray them. Each article ended with ways readers could help. Meanwhile, Daniel made a definitive break from his family's empire. He resigned from Carter Defense, using his savings to launch a foundation for ethical business practices and environmental restoration. He hired dozens of employees who had lost jobs because of the scandal. "I can't undo what my grandfather did," he told me one evening as we walked along the harbor. "But I can try to build something better out of the wreckage." Our relationship healed slowly. Honesty replaced the secrets. There were painful conversations, nights we argued, days we doubted. But with each passing week, trust grew stronger. Daniel's family remained fractured. His mother refused to acknowledge me, standing by the general even as he appeared in court, her face a mask of pride and denial. Lena, however, became an ally. "You showed more guts at that dinner than anyone in this family has in decades," she told me one afternoon over coffee. Someone needed to knock him off his pedestal. Most surprising of all was my bond with Eleanor and Daniel's father. Rather than blaming me, they reached out. Over lunch a month after the scandal, his father admitted, "We built this company on principles." Somewhere along the way, he forgot that profit without integrity means nothing. Eleanor took my hand. "You forced a reckoning, Claire. Painful, yes, but necessary." 8 months after that night, I sat across from General Carter one final time in a conference room. His trial loomed. Daniel insisted on coming with me. The general looked diminished, stripped of the aura he once commanded. His voice lacked the bark of authority I remembered. "I underestimated you, Miss Donovan. A mistake I won't make again." "Why call me here?" I asked. He glanced between us. "To admit I was wrong. Not about the contracts. I still believe I did what was necessary for growth." He paused, swallowing his pride. "But I was wrong about you. You are not what I called you that night." It was the closest thing to an apology I knew he'd ever give. I nodded but said nothing. He turned to Daniel. "And I was wrong about you. I thought your idealism was weakness. I see now it's not." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Is that all, grandfather? My lawyers expect a plea deal. Prison time." He gave a hollow laugh. "From command to a cell. Quite the fall." As we left, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "I think so," I said softly. "That's as close to an apology as we'll ever get." "It changes nothing," he said firmly. "No," I agreed. "But it closes a chapter. Since the night I was branded dead weight in borrowed silk, everything in my life had changed. My career flourished, job offers from national outlets, a book deal, testimony before congressional committees on oversight and accountability. But more importantly, the insecurity I once carried into that dining room had dissolved. I no longer measured my worth against others' approval. I knew my value. Daniel and I moved into a modest apartment. No mansion, no legacy wealth, just a life we were building together. He worked longer hours than he ever had under his grandfather, but this time with purpose, not pressure. On our 1-year anniversary, he brought me back to the small Italian restaurant where we'd first had dinner. Afterward, we walked by the Charles River, the same place he had first told me he loved me. "My grandmother told me something recently," he said, taking my hand. "That the measure of a person isn't what they own but what they stand for, what they're willing to fight for. And when you find someone who makes you want to be your best self, you never let them go." I smiled, squeezing his hand back. "She's wise." He looked at me with steady eyes. "That night you showed everyone what real class and courage look like. You reminded me that true worth has nothing to do with wealth." I nodded. We both learned the same lesson. Empires built on lies eventually crumble. But relationships built on truth can endure anything. As we walked under the stars, I realized something. That night at the Carter estate, what was meant to break me had, in fact, set me free. His cruelty had become the catalyst for truth, change, and growth. The most important lesson of all? Our worth isn't defined by others' judgments, only by our own integrity. Sometimes, it takes being called dead weight to discover you were carrying more strength than anyone could imagine.